guys in the room will be the first people in Mendocino to hear about this opportunity. So you've got a bit of a head start, but the only way to make real that is for us to be able to keep in contact with you. We're going to share your contact details with the Arts Council of Mendocino, with Alyssa as well, and together we'll be working on a process for engagement. More to follow on that. So a California Creative Core, what is it? The state has proposed a pilot program. Its origins being the work that the Task Force for Business and Workforce Development underneath the state budget. And almost $60 million has been given to the State Agency for the Arts. By the way, we're going to be sharing this presentation with you in the week to come. So it's wonderful for you to take notes, but I don't want you to worry if you miss anything. It's going to be sharing all this with you. And we also have a Facebook page and we'll be sharing that with you too. So more to come on that. But just to say, California Arts Council is in receipt of close to 60 million to be divided between the whole of California. California Arts Council, having been the beneficiary of a significant uplift in funding due to pandemic era spending from the state on arts programs, much needed arts programs, in recognition of the devastation on our sector from the pandemic, decided early on that it would like to create an RFP, a request for proposals, for individual arts organizations across the state who felt that they had the capacity and expertise and knowledge to lead and administer funds in their region. Nevada County Arts Council applied for the Upstate region. We're one of 9 regions in the state. And what does this tell you, looking at this map? We're the largest geographic area. We have the largest number of counties, possibly the most diverse geography and extreme geography between mountain ranges, watersheds, river systems, fire districts. We are, if we think of fire alone, we're at constant risk of catastrophic fire, and your community knows this, like none other. So we've taken on this crazy, beautiful project, and these other color-coded areas of California or the other regions, each of which have their own administrative organization. And we'll let you know how this is going to work as we progress. Of course, we know that there are many ways to look at California. The map on the left shows another way that's currently being administered underneath an umbrella of funds connected with economic development. And this is the California Economic Resiliency Fund. Who's heard of the SUR initiative? Fabulous.
And we got it.
And you got it. This is great.
Yeah. And arts are included in that plan. So that's another $5 million for economic development and resiliency. So it's what Eliza's talking about today is just for arts, but this other pot of money will have a way to engage with arts as well.
And we show these maps as a way to remind, it certainly reminds me that there are more ways to access funding for the creative sector than through the State Agency for the Arts. There is this fabulous initiative, SUR, Community Economic Resiliency Fund. There are also other ways of looking at California. This is a map that shows the way water flows within upstate California. And would you like to speak to that a little? Because you speak to it so well.
Well, just like with Native peoples, they're not counted by counties, so we need to always be looking. Rivers are not either. And in our region, we have 3 different primary larger watersheds. So Mendocino County is part of the North Coast region where the rivers are flowing out. Obviously, some water from Mendocino is moved over into the Sacramento River through the Eel River. And then so then the Sacramento Basin goes all the way down to the Bay and out the Golden Gate. And the northern Powhatan region, it drains out to the Great Basin. So as we've been approaching each county, we've been making sense of, where we are as terms of a drop of rain falling on the landscape, where would it flow out, to also understand the connectivity between different areas.
Just before we began our listening session, Alyssa and Katrina and I were looking at a map of Mendocino, and acknowledging that many of your roads follow river canyons. So this makes sense. It begins to show you how communities communicate. And indeed, the map on the right of the screen shows this is how we plan to reach you all when we're doing our listening tour. It's the way that communities practically connect. So that said, let's have a look at Upstate region as a whole.
Well, the thing that's amazing in bringing together this upstate region, there's 19 different counties. And although it's just over 4% of California's population, we entail 33% of, 31%. Yeah, of California's geography. So much, huge portion of California is involved in this upstate region. And then within that, there's huge variability, whether it's the amount of rain that you can see of 14 inches up in Modoc, where we were last week, to up in Del Norte, it being 95 inches a year in parts of areas there. We just talked about the different ways water might flow, huge range in elevations within our region as well. And the economy, what's driving in the different counties, what's driving the economy. So we have just tried to look at that because as the task to create these guidelines, we need to consider the huge variability of the county.
Fabulous. And let's go back just for a minute, just to look at what actually this is. So Nevada County Arts Council is among 13 other organizations across California administering $60 million. Our portion of that for upstate is close to 3.4 million. As part of a new grant program designed to increase public awareness related to water and energy conservation, climate mitigation and emergency preparedness, relief and recovery. So of course that includes fire. What else might it include? Civic engagement, including election participation. How do individuals and communities engage, and how are their voices heard? And how does this connect to health? Social justice and community engagement and public health awareness. Of course, we've just come through a major pandemic that caught us off guard in the same way that the Great Depression did in between the 1930s and the 1940s. In fact, the program California Creative Tour was inspired in part by the idea that artists might contribute to recovery in profound ways, in much the same way that the Works Progress Administration, what we know as the WPA, did between the Great Depression and the Second World War. Amazing projects came out of artists in completely unforeseen ways across all genres and disciplines. And so it's worth kind of looking back so that we don't delve into the WPA today, but it's worthwhile. There are such fun articles that cover all the different disciplines and all the works that were achieved for society's good as part of the WPA. So where did we get to? That's right, we went there. Tell me when to stop. So this is great. We've landed on the part that, how on earth is a small agency like the Nevada County Arts Council? We are one of the top ranking arts councils in California, along with Arts Council of Mendocino. And that's why Alyssa and I work quite closely together. But we're one of a network of county arts agencies across the state. So imagine 58 counties, and at any given time between 50 and 58 counties will have a state local partner. To become a state local partner, Alyssa and I have to go before our boards of supervisors, under county government once a year and seek a resolution, having delivered a final report, an annual report that shows that we are eligible to apply for that special designation, a unique designation, one umbrella arts agency for county. And our role is to work together to make sure that our diverse communities across California are properly served. So we thought, what better way than to administer a grants program, knowing that we have this accessible network of county arts agencies who will be your contact in your communities to help you in terms of technical assistance, professional development, grant writing, thinking up, brainstorming projects, etc., etc. We're here with you today because we want to hear from you stories that aren't naturally accessible to us where we are. These will inform our grant guidelines. We hope to keep those guidelines as simple as possible, but we need to learn from each day. So the state's given us this crazy new tool called the California Healthy Places Index that was developed by the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. Don't let the Southern California piece put you off. It's now becoming such a popular tool that I believe yesterday Utah adopted it. So it's a tool which, although at first sight appears very technical, will provide you all the clues you need in dreaming up solutions as artists and as partners with organizations in tackling issues in Mendocino. Would you like to speak a little bit to this county, particularly to Mendocino?
Yeah, so before we go into the Healthy Places Index and look at the specific data, we try to also understand some of the dynamics within the counties. So for me, as a watershed scientist, I always look right away first at how the water flows and the different dynamics and who's engaging that way. Also the lands, the public lands that are there, how much is held. When we were up in Plumas County, it was incredible how much of the land was federal or public land, and that really impacts the tax basis. Here through Listen Self, we have the information of how much of the land is actually in use for privately held timber rights and other pieces there. That, of course, obviously impacts as well. Colleges and universities to help understand educational opportunities as youth grow up, and also some of the, when you see the Healthy Places Index indicators for education, it can make sense for some of the things we see. Understanding the Native Americans and the different rancherias and reservations here, and in the different regions, and community resource groups. And we sort of ask this question as we look at this too, like, let us know too, who else should we be considering as we think about your county? Emergency bypass for children. I have to figure out how to do it. So, that's the daughter
in the room.
That's the daughter. But and also asking if anyone from here is associated specifically with any of these community resource groups, the rancherias, anything like that. So.
And I'm noticing your notes within the presentation. Mendocino is noted for its distinctive Pacific Ocean coastline, its location along California's Lost Coast, redwood forests, wine production, microbrews, and liberal views about the use of cannabis and support for its legalization. And then you talk about the very many notable historic and recreational attractions as well. So let's move on. Let's look at Mendocino County and wildfire impacts. This is a really sensitive subject. We so acknowledge this. And when does Mendocino, you've suffered so much from it. Would you like to speak to this, Alyssa? Or would you like Katrina to share with you what she's found?
I'd love to hear from Katrina. We definitely have been severely impacted by wildfire. And the arts have been involved in the recovery in multiple ways. There's a mosaic memorial at the Redwood Valley Grange, for example, by Elizabeth Brady, that is a memorial to the 9 people who lost their lives in the 2017 fire, and it includes like fragments from people's home sites. And the people who participated in that were able to make their own mosaic and take them into their new life, with it, new homes that they went in. So this is, I think, the place where we've seen projects interact with this subject in much the way that this California Creative Core grant is asking the community to do in order to partner around awareness. And Elizabeth Gravy then also did a disaster preparedness series of mosaics in Alex Thomas Plaza. So that's another way that we can, this is wildfire preparedness is a big topic too. So
Marvelous.
I know one of the biggest things that stands out, there's very few counties that are not facing, Mendocino, of course, has had some of the biggest impacts. But so in some places it's interesting as people will say, I think it's too late, the climate card sailed, it's actually, the biggest question I will pose with this is you look at fire and its relationship to your community. It's like, what is our future goal point? What are some ways we can be shifting our relationship with the landscape? So again, thinking about that here in Mendocino, given what we know now, what we all are coming to know, what we might anticipate. So it's.
And a lot of these topics have to do with the relationship between people and place. And the love of place, and also the way that the love of place can be a uniting, a social factor. And so I think that's another way to think of the objectives of this grant, is that we're uniting around our love of place, which is something that artists do naturally. So even though it may feel like a little bit of a stretch to ask artists to grapple with these very big problems, the arts community is suffering from these things as well, and other limitations. This if you can find your way into the topic that way, I think that may be helpful, that it's about place and about uniting around a love of place.
Absolutely.
And community.
Absolutely, Alyssa, because for all the technical information we're sharing today, it has to boil down to something that's simple enough to grasp, around which to create meaning. So let's keep it simple as much as we can. So this is a look as shared from the Healthy Places Index. This is your racial and ethnic demographics. And this becomes very interesting. And when you're thinking of applying for a grant from the California Creative Corps, and in each region, we're going to be, there are how many tracks within Mendocino? You remember?
It'll come up.
It'll come up in a moment. I'm jumping ahead of myself. But it's going to be important that you just have a look and see if you can draw correlations between the relative health of communities and the social and cultural makeup of the, and the map itself gives you clues. So we just wanted to draw attention to this, and we'll show you how to find it in each tract of land that we look at. So here is the Healthy Places Index. We're going to do a kind of live demonstration too, but because we want to provide you all, each community we visit with the best kind of tools to jumpstart your thinking in advance of the program opening in early spring. We've created a PowerPoint where we've sort of, screenshotted various bits to help you prepare to use it as a tool yourself. So it's healthyplacesindex.org, and it might be nice for our Zoom friends to have that link as well. How are we doing, friends who are participating by Zoom today? Can you hear everybody when they speak? What's our feedback?
Yes.
Great. So just to welcome those of you who've just arrived, can we pass around the email list? Because I want to make sure we capture absolutely everyone. You did it?
Yeah, it's right there. It's right there.
Okay.
So yeah, just another reminder to just speak up when you're speaking for Zoom participants, for the new people that are coming in too.
We had been taking a little mic with us and some sort of fairly low grade PA stuff, but we decided not to, because what happened was that the owl kept zooming on the speaker. So instead of us capturing you,
not the speaking person,
it caught the speaker. It was like so weird. So anyway, this is what it looks like. So if you were to look at this map, the one that's up there on the screen, what do you think the different colors mean? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Like, what would the dark green versus the dark blue areas show? Do you think, like a guess?
Rain. Money. Health.
Yes.
Cultural diversity.
Could be. Well, all these things that you've said lend themselves to a community's health, of course. But it's really simple. It's divided into 4 categories. So the dark green implies the healthiest communities when compared with the rest of California. The dark blue imply the least healthy communities when compared with the rest of California. And then the shades of green and the pale blue and the pale green are towards or away from health. So pale blue is, not so great. And dark blue is, let's look at this together and create some solutions. And the dark green is, they're cool, we're not gonna give them all the money, you know, so. So let's look at this a little better. Katrina, would you like to speak to this? Just very quickly.
Well, for the upstate region, I went through and looked at the different tracks and the scores, just to sort of understand how many were dark blue, the different rankings. These basically, the dark blue is the 0 to 25th percentile. So that would be the bottom tier, and it would imply if you were at the 25th percentile, then 25% of communities have a less healthy ranking than you do of the tracks, whatever you're looking at. If you look at it, Eliza will show you in a bit, but you can look in different ways. If you're looking at tracks or if you're looking at counties. So it's just letting you know where you stand relative to other communities. So if you're at the 25% have worse conditions, 75% have better conditions. So this is how the upstate region ranks out of 374 tracks total. 22 are excluded. That's the hatched areas. And those are areas in which you either have a population under 1,500 people, so they feel they don't, and which seems sort of unfair, right? If you live in those areas, why are you just, not part of the data? But it's hard to draw correlations when the numbers are that low for an area. Or it's an area that has a high residential population, which can happen, for instance, in areas where there's prisons or.
Dormitory style living, essentially.
Mhm.
So, yeah, perhaps not residential, but.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I did maybe.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly.
good.
Thanks for.
because of
thanks for
course
catching
we all live in residential
Yeah,
areas.
thanks for catching that word. Yes, that's what I meant.
No problem.
Dormitory, yes, exactly.
And census tracts, tell us about that.
Yeah, and using census tracts primarily, when I wrote this up, instead of looking at counties and other pieces, the thing about census tracts is they are intended to follow geographic boundaries and so that they can be compared over time, over long periods of time. That's why we do the census every 10 years. So if you have a big increase in population or a big decrease, they might be split or combined, but otherwise the boundaries stay consistent.
And when you go on to the Healthy Places Index yourselves later, you'll see that the Healthy Places Index map, the HBI map, defaults to county tracts, and it's the way we're choosing to look at it. You can also view by city or by county, or by legislative district. You can see what your assembly area looks like.
I may be jumping the gun, but what are the factors they're measuring to determine? what's
You're
health?
doing a perfect question.
Okay.
Great segue.
Then you can understand
This is perfect. This is so great. It must mean that we're getting better at the way we order the slides. Okay, this is great. I know we keep you in suspense and then we can't do it any longer. So when you're in the map and you click on one of these tracks, a bar along the left-hand side opens up and shows you these areas called policy action areas. And these are the ways in which the relative health of communities are measured next to one another. So for example, in Mendocino, wherever you see one of those little vertical black lines crossing over into the dark blue areas, that's like a flag for you to look at housing conditions, healthcare access, social factors, etc., etc. We also encourage you to look in the areas that are just pale blue, because within those pale blue areas are also indicators which might be very dark blue and which are flags and which are danger zones. And you want to be aware of those when you're writing grants in case you have a project that perfectly matches that challenge. So do you want to just speak to those the way you beautifully
Well, this is broken up specifically for Mendocino County as a whole. When we run through the map, we're going to look at a specific tract. So this is just showing you the summary as a whole. And again, just as Eliza said, if you're looking at areas where the bar is again for the county, just because it might not be in the dark blue for that particular, for the generalization of economy, if you open up over to economics, you can see that for Mendocino County, the above poverty does land into the lowest percentile. So you can see also for education, it's right middle, 50% for education overall. But you go up to high school enrollment and you see that it's actually only the 11.3 percentile for high school enrollment. So these would be the specific things you want to hone in on when you're looking at some of the community conditions that might warrant.
And some of the challenges that you as artists or collaborators want to partner on. So here we are, some more observations about Mendocino.
Yeah, and just know you'll have this presentation. This is the summary of some of those things that we saw on that previous slide. Some of the things that stood out. And so don't get overwhelmed by all the numbers. Just know some of us love to look at things sort of this way. Others have to,
Some of us.
That's
Katrina.
But one of the things that really stands out, you know, the big range in per capita income here in Mendocino. That goes from 19, just over, you know, almost 20,000 to 42,000. So a big range in the per capita average income. Housing stood out too. The lowest score for housing was at the 14.3 percentile. And it had low scores with homeowner and renter cost share burden. So looking at sort of the overall cost of living here and housing habitability. Economic as well as summarized there with some very low numbers in some of the tracks. And again, it's going to make a lot more sense as we run through this. But just really wanting to flag.
But it's the most, I mean, for years, for decades, for centuries, artists have been asked to solve impossible challenges in society that government has been unable to solve. And here we are again. But this time we've been given a tool. So imagine a few years from now, the nation has been watching California run this pilot program, which is the first statewide program, workforce development program for artists of its kind since the WPA's federal iteration of it. So if you imagine that all eyes are upon us, be thinking, if you've got a project in mind, how can that project become a case study, a gold standard for other communities to adopt? Does that make sense? It's the most delicious challenge, and we're trying to make sure you thoroughly understand the potential of this tool, the Healthy Places Index, without completely scaring you off. I promise you will have fun in a minute. So let's have a look at a live demonstration. Let's get out of there for a second. We'll go straight onto the internet. So we'll just pull it up and have a look at. No, that's not it. Yeah, there we go. Brilliant. So this is when you go onto healthyplacesindex.org, you arrive here, you click on the visit the HPI map. But I'm going to show you one other thing first. I'm going to show you, and it would be great, Gianna, if you would share with our Zoom participants the policy action guides, if you provide that link.
Okay.
That's wonderful, because
Yeah.
this gets, it's fabulous. It's the kind of why of this. So remember how we had a look when you click on a tract and then a bar on the left opens up with the policy action guides. This is the why of those. These are the things that are measured. So let's take that one thing a look. So if you go down here, you see all the, economic, education, social, transportation, healthcare access, neighborhood, housing, and clean environment. And yeah. And then
I
know. But if you click on read more about whatever policy action area you want to, let's jump into employed. This is where it says, what does this indicator measure and its connection to health? This gives you great narrative to put in any application, depending on the project that you want to choose and where to start. If perhaps you're an artist or a group of artists working with a social service organization or a department of government, such as behavioral health or public health, etc. This gives you some good clues as to how to start and how to initiate a conversation between agencies and artists. But let's go back and let's jump into this map. Let's find Mendocino. I might need help from someone, Katrina here. So it'll open up as California. Okay, let's see if I get this right.
You can see Willits right there. You can see Willits.
Yeah, I know. It's the most extraordinary thing. So we need to go north. It's so fascinating looking at areas from this perspective. And yeah, you've spotted it already. So the Arts Council, Mendocino is situated in Ukiah, which is this extraordinary mix of like a dark blue, light blue, and pale green. And let's go to, should we start with Willits? Because that's where we are now.
We're not healthy here.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? So we're a little dark blue oasis, and see how immediately this is probably not quite a sort of an oxymoron, is it? Exactly. And here you are. Here are your community conditions within which are your policy action areas. Those are the units by which we're measuring the community of Willits. And you can see immediately, would any of you like me to zoom in on a particular, like one of those dark blue areas? It could be economic, education.
Education.
Yeah, should we look at education for a moment? So what you do is click on that little arrow. And here are the measurements, the degree to which community members have access to a bachelor's degree or higher, high school enrollment, and preschool enrollment. Is there any among those three that you want me to zoom in on some more?
High school involvement.
High school enrollment? Yeah. You want to speak to this, Katrina?
Well, for each tract, it's going to tell you about the score and compare it to the county. Because sometimes in some areas, it's been interesting to see, you know, that we have the larger context. Where a tract particularly diverges from the county. That would be an interesting thing to understand, you know, why is the condition so different? Here, as you can see, it's actually not that far off. And as we noted earlier, high school enrollment was low. It does then share it comparing overall to the state. And then if Eliza continues to scroll down, it tells you exactly what it's measuring. How many percent of 15 to 17-year-olds that are in school, as well as the connection to health. You also have that other page you can go to for more details.
And it tells you, you know, every school age youth should have educational opportunities that prepare them for higher education, a career, and the future of their choice. Education is linked to increased life expectancy and reduced chronic disease rates, infant mortality, and other negative health outcomes. And I'm reading this out, even though I know you can see it on the screen, for the benefit of Zoom participants who may not be keeping up with our sort of rapid mobilization of the map. So let's.
I guess one thing I just want to, this one has me very curious because I've often seen the lower high school enrollment in some of the more remote areas. It's made sense, but here in Willits, I am very curious to learn more, whether now or later, of ideas of why that is, because it is so proximal, obviously, to high school.
We're definitely going to do that. So let's scroll. Let's look at some of these other tracts. So let's look at what's this dark blue one, which is pretty large to the east of Mendocino. This is tract 101.
There's not that many people that live up here.
It must be more than 1,500 though.
This is
Yeah, but
Round
we have
Valley.
fugitives.
That's
That's Coglo and north of there. And to the east of there is.
You live there?
Nashville.
That's what. Yeah.
Come on.
May I invite you, because we're recording? Okay. I very much like to invite you to speak, but we will not be able to hear you. And also because we're recording, neither will our Zoom participants. Can you come and scooch in near us up front? There's a chair here. Trini, do you mind? Oh, thank you so much. That's brilliant.
Did somebody say what is that Covelo and Laytonville?
Yes, I'm gonna zoom in right into it so we can see, and you'll see, can you see that you're beginning to see communities? And actually, this was the area that we were looking at earlier, where you could clearly see the roads running alongside river canyons.
Where do you?
etc.
In Cobble.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to remember. It's where the airport is.
You have it right there. It's showing
Yeah.
right up.
Exactly. There we go. So, I believe this particular tract has a troubled and very sensitive history in terms of the treatment of tribal peoples over the course of, you know, since European settlement, essentially. So troubled that one wonders if some kind of stories might come from this, some kind of projects that might in some way be treated as reparations almost through narrative. There are other things going on in this track. Should we look at economic first of all? Or why don't we scroll and look at the sort of demographic mix? That's a little higher, isn't it? I've gone past it. Here we go.
A little shadow. on this one.
Okay, great. Okay. Do you want to speak to this part?
Oh, me, well, this is the demographics, so obviously, we spoke earlier of the percentage in Mendocino of Native Americans overall. I'm trying to remember the number. Yeah, was that right? Yeah. So in this particular tracks, 26% obviously makes sense given what you were sharing as well. But it's of particular interest to us as we're trying to understand then some of these other indices.
Yeah. So here you've got a very dark blue area and a really elevated percentage of indigenous peoples. So that's a clue to creating some kind of project, isn't it? In a way. We also have 20% Hispanic or Latino as well. And only 41% white, which is so unusual for rural upstate California. Most counties have an overall some 80–90% ratio. And in this particular tract, it's only 41%, and it's very dark blue. These conditions do not look healthy. What can we do to help? And again, we're just using this tract as an example.
I still go back up to
Yeah.
indices for
Great.
just because you have economic. Remember on this line, and you see all three,
Employment.
sure, all three are dark blue.
Yeah.
3.5 percentile unemployment. So if she opens that up, you'll see this is measuring the percent of people aged 25 to 64 with a job. Now, the 3.5 percentile correlates with 55.9% of people in that age, that age range have a job. So again, just understanding.
So only half of people aged between 25 and 64 have jobs. So that's again, it's like, how can one create awareness around opportunities for employment? Is that a project?
There's another.
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you. Could you-
Well, I think sometimes in places that are very rural, there aren't a lot of
There aren't, no.
opportunities for employment. It's
Right.
not about awareness.
No,
Everybody, if there's a job, everybody finds out about it.
when I said awareness, I meant awareness of the issue and who needs to be at the table. Who do we need to speak with, and what role do artists have to play in this?
What was the social, who put on social emotion?
Sure.
The census response rate was really low here, and a lot of the employment would not be captured in this region. There are people who are very busy and they're working hard. But they may not be answering the census.
We have a dying farming business up here, which is marijuana. And since it's been legalized, all the small farmers, and there are a lot of them are out of business, they are giving up. So you have a lot of what were hardworking people that couldn't be listed up here.
There's also people working hard on farms that will not be listed as jobs because they can't keep them.
They're undocumented.
Right.
And not just the undocumented, but
Unpermitted.
the illegal cannabis farms.
Right.
People would not write, they have such a job.
Yeah.
They show up as unemployed, even though they work.
And we're hearing this a lot, and we know that the 2020 census, there is the sense that it is flawed. We're not here to get political at all. We're presenting the information that we have and then trying to think, well, how can we wrestle with this? What do we do with this information in order to create change? So it's something in relation to the census response. It's fascinating and
How
sadly.
do they judge the census response rate if people didn't respond? How do they know? where are they getting that figure from? They're just guessing. How many people didn't fill it out?
They do a pretty thorough job of following up on people, sending out.
I know there's a lot of deep distrust of the government
Yes,
in our area,
yes,
in the native community, but also in the non-native community,
Yeah.
especially the rural people like she was talking
Yes.
about. It's very strong, it's overtly strong, and a lot of people, it's always, I mean, it's good that we have the census, and I'm glad they're able to come up with some data, but it's not, you're not ever gonna get the 100% data, because
Right.
people avoid it.
yes. I completely understand. So how is this relevant to health? Everyone should be able to contribute their voice to the political process and to participate in their communities. Census participation is an indicator of both social power and social cohesion. I love those words, social power and social cohesion. And we find that a lot, the idea of lending our voice to something and the sense of autonomy as individual human beings that it gives us to feel that we have a voice in, so that things aren't just happening to us. And so how, as artists, do we help make this happen and improve upon the conditions in which people find that they can engage with government, with each other, in civic life?
And there's so many amazing stories of resiliency and beauty in some of these dark blue regions. That's something artists can do, is amplify those stories,
Right.
put those forward, you know. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that because the library in Kobo is such a great example of that. There are many examples.
Blackberry Festival.
Blackberry Festival,
and
radio station, Power Community. Farm,
Radio.
station. So, yeah, we don't want to be super doom and gloom about our regions that are not getting high scores, because those stories can be brought to light.
Absolutely. So we can continue to look at this, but what I might encourage is rather, now that you have access to it, you know where to find it, if you have fun with it on your own, and then we'll continue, because I like,
Do you
we
want
would
to show
like,
real quickly the one last thing?
yes, sure.
Or let me just mention it.
Yeah.
When you have that area open on the left, you can pick a policy area that interests you.
Like this one,
If you do that, go down and say if you're really interested in education. And you would like to see what the high school enrollment is, or you can just leave that open. You don't even have to open. Go ahead and go back. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. there you go. Now she can go on over and she can go to every single tract. So just click light blue, check out, but you can see the numbers for every single tract.
I see what you mean, yeah.
I think, oh, you want to get over here and like, yeah.
Oh, sorry,
That's
sorry, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and so you can see as you go through it, so you can look at a particular variable at every single tract, you know.
Yeah,
And see
once
how,
you've got it open, I get it. I'm trying to figure out how to do that, Katrina. This is why you come with me all over the place. Okay, so let's go back to this. So we had our live demonstration. Excuse me. Yes,
I have a curious question about all of this, in the sense that this is an external agency putting on a perception that may not be valid for that community. So, I'm particularly considering the fact that that's a whole other set of values that the residents in any other place might have, an entirely different value system, especially where it comes to education. And especially when we're talking about native populations, their perception of education is substantially different than ours. So how do we deal with that differential?
Yeah.
I just want to throw that.
no, it's a great point, and you know, this is a guideline that's been given, but what really matters, this is the whole reason this listening tour exists. It's like, this is a guideline to look at things, but there is nothing that we are drawing from this to believe that that's the story. The story is this, the story is.
you're the ones creating the story.
And I understand that, but I think it's important to just collectively remind ourselves that we're coming with a particular set of values that may not be
Mhm.
exactly the same as that community.
I agree, and it's always like this, isn't it? When one's creating, when one's been given a tool with which to evaluate what it is that you are being funded for, there are always going to be flaws in it that you're going to want to challenge. So as the administering organization for the California Creative Core in the upstate region, we are going to be feeding this back to the state. We might be telling them that the way they think about exclusion zones isn't fair to the people that are in prison, you know, or in dormitory style living conditions. You know, perhaps there's another way of looking at them. There will be all sorts of nuanced challenges. And I'm pretty sure the Public Health Alliance of Southern California would possibly like to hear about some of this nuance. So
Another thing that's very interesting on All Out of Me is when you go on through and you look at neighborhood, it does a ranking about park access. And all the, often the neighborhood scores are very high in northern the upstate region. Because of the tree canopy numbers driving it up. If you look at park access, it's very, very low in many of these communities, and we know very well, you know,
Yeah.
Our life-
Whose idea of the park?
yes, exactly. And these are all things we're going to give feedback to, because this was created from Southern California, and there's a different story we have to tell from up here of what measures for health. So any of those things highlighting, getting that feedback back, we want to give it to them as well, because we don't know, Utah literally just last night is adopting this. We would like to have a tool that measures rural parts of communities.
You
So-
know, something that I think Judy was speaking to that might not be captured, and when you said who is left out, when you were describing the community.
Yeah.
Like, we have a high Native American population, we have a high Latino population, but also we have a high back to the land legacy. So that's another community that maybe doesn't like to participate in
nice,
standard,
very
right?
good.
And so what I was thinking when we were talking about education is a lot of people homeschool. I don't know how that's
I
captured.
think they're still enrolled though, aren't they?
Yes.
I thought that too. I thought maybe it's just because, you know, it's rural homeschooling, but I think they're still enrolled, so I think they would still be captured, but
The back to
there
the
are
land.
those backstories, aren't there?
Yeah, and you have like, you have agricultural families who've been for a long time. And then you have a high influence of like dropping out of society, going back to the land. People actually who had a lot of education generally, who ended up growing cannabis and hiding from the world. That runs under everything.
I'm so glad, you know, it's interesting. This is the 5th county we visited out of 19. And it's the first time I've heard explicit mention of the back to land movement, which is so prevalent and relevant to upstate California, isn't it? We have it in all our communities. So these are the interesting stories that we're nursing out. And I kept repeating that because I wanted Katrina to write it down, because it's gonna go into the next PowerPoint.
I think our county in particular has a high instance of this.
Yeah.
Because people in the 70s, a lot of people moved up here
Yeah.
from the Bay Area.
Well, it was the Emerald Train, the Mendocino,
Yeah.
Humboldt and Dill North, and that was that was, and we were the mecca.
Yeah.
Really.
And you have people who went to like Stanford and Berkeley and Cal and came here and dropped out, right? So that is something unique.
Dropped out, but simultaneously perhaps became movement leaders of another kind. And so perhaps back to the land, the back to the land movement isn't synonymous with dropping out and lack of contribution. Perhaps it is, perhaps
Just
it
not
isn't. So
being
again,
visible to
nuance. Yes.
the counters.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
great oral history project called Promise of Paradise that just came out a couple of years ago to mark the 50th anniversary of the Back to the Land movement. So there could be projects that build on that.
Perfect. If you could, I'd love to hear, are you sure? Really? Okay, great. So what are the factors that might determine, okay, I'm sorry, I can't resist it. We didn't really look at neighborhood. And I feel for rural communities, neighborhood is very important. It's one of those policy action areas that pop up on the left in a bar. when you look, when you click on a tract. Neighborhood, we mentioned it in relation to things like tree canopy and park access. You know, are you within half a mile of access to a place where you can sit or commune with your community? Another thing that they look at in terms of the health of neighborhoods is this weird thing called retail density, the degree to which a community or an individual has access to the right kind of retail resources. But we ask ourselves, is this a Dollar General, or is it a proliferation that could grow and be nurtured with mom and pop businesses or artisan craft shops that are engineered by artists working in collaboration with Main Street and downtown merchants associations. So there are all kinds of interesting little clues, and it requires that we think about it in a slightly kind of I hate to use the phrase blue sky thinking way. We're going to, you had your hand up.
I did, I had something else that, like this undercurrent that popped up in my mind, and I'm not sure how to capture it or communicate it or anything like that, but this idea of access to parks. In our area, we don't have parks, it's all private property, but then there's this undercurrent of acts, like traction with agencies that can actually do anything about it. And I don't know how that could be measured. I mean, in some places you just go to the city council and say, we want this to happen, and they'll say, sure, we have this fund in this department, and we'll do that, we'll work on that. But we've been told there was a park surveys for the county, and the outcome was, we need more parks, and the answer was, we're not gonna make any more parks, period, done, Coco. Yeah, that track 101 we were just looking at, and so there's this other question of, I guess, it's kind of like an access to resources to propel change in a community, or traction with local government versus, and in addition to, does that government have the capacity to serve those needs? Because I feel like some of these communities, like, sure, we'll get a new track light up there, and others is like, we'll wait for 10 years for our change.
Right. Right.
And that's parallel to another issue that in this county, we only have 4 incorporated towns. And one of those only has 400 people on it. So this is not a place where we have city councils for a lot of the population. And city councils, I think, are highly responsive because they're us. And I think county government is probably less responsive.
Yes.
I think also the definition of the neighborhood in relation to this was put together by people who live in an urban area.
Yes, we've heard
We
this
don't really
before.
have
Yeah, it's a good
neighborhoods,
point.
we have areas like Brook Trails or,
Watersheds.
yeah, or they live up on the Eel
Yes.
River, or, you know, right here in town, in the middle of town, yeah, we have City Park right there. But the definition of a park, for example, Tilden Park in Berkeley, our entire drive, anywhere that you go outside of town is more beautiful than their quote unquote park. So what does a park and a neighborhood mean to us? Whereas the people who devised this are thinking in a whole nother, they're like on Mars compared to where we are.
So we're following up on that, where, other than the census, does this data that goes into this program come from? Because not all of those categories were on the census. Where else are they pulling this information from?
I don't know, it's a great question. I mean, so I didn't know those categories weren't.
Yeah, they don't
I mean, I'm
ask
just
for
trying to
what
remember.
neighborhood.
I'm trying to remember doing the census. and
Yeah, I'm
what
trying to remember the
categories are.
questions asked, and
Yeah.
I don't remember all of those being on there, so I'm just wondering if they're pulling from other
Yeah.
information, if they're making
Yes.
this up on their own, because you're talking about, for example, the park access, they're looking at street coverage, that's obviously not on the census.
Oh,
They're,
yeah.
they
That would
may be
probably,
looking at population and then comparing that to.
And the addresses.
no, I'm sure tree canopy is one that they easily obtain from GIS data.
Yeah,
That's for by
And
the tracks.
USGS.
And they're probably comparing over time also. the
But
changes
if
in-
you have an address in Oakland,
Yeah.
they could just look on a map and tell you what neighborhood that is. But you have an address, you know, 13459 Sherwood Road. here in Willits.
Mhm.
That's not a neighborhood. Well, yeah, it's out Sherwood Road, but you know, doesn't mean it's not the same thing.
Yeah, and since the purpose of the meeting is, it's a listening session prior to actually finalizing the guidelines for the grant. I think the useful piece here is that, and we know, those of us who are working on the guidelines, that there may not be perfect matches between a proposal and what we're seeing on this. And so to have a way for a community to make a case for a project, using, like, I love Nina Simon's of by four principles, which is a community is, like, she gives the example of like an exhibit about children in the foster care system, and how the entire exhibit is curated, everything about it is done by the kids themselves who are in the foster care
Wouldn't that
system,
be-
not an outsider kind of curating it and, deciding what to include and exclude. So I think, yeah,
Let's make in other words, that everything that is done by the agency working with or by for all, which is the name of the agency, is done of, by, and for all within the community. So it's community led.
it's not like an outsider going into Covelo saying, here's what you guys need. It's the people,
Exactly.
the residents of the community itself saying, these are our priorities and this is what we need.
I can give you a perfect example of that. In Nevada County, where we come from, our local tribe in Western Nevada County, where our county seat is the Nisenan tribe. The Nisenan tribe have 142 members surviving from a population of over 7,000 at the time of the gold rush. And have since been basically all but exterminated. Their language was considered lost until the tribal spokesperson, who also sits on our board of directors and influences policy and is wonderful, Shelley, said, hang on a second, our language isn't lost, because my grandmother and my mother sang songs to me in the cradle and as I grew up, and I know these words, and I've gone through the forest and picked acorns, and I know what the Nisenan word for acorns is. Over time, the Nisenan worked with UC Davis, with language specialists, linguists, etc., and have entered a phase of language recovery. Nevada County Arts Council applied for a local impact grant from the California Arts Council, in which we partnered with our local film festival, who provided a match. So altogether $36,000. And their match provided incredible equipment, filmmaking, documentary equipment, as well as educating the Nisenan tribes people themselves out of how to document the recovery of their all but lost language, and create a feature film from it. So that's a perfect example of an all by for all project, and it actually was. Members of all by for all.
I
So-
think one thing that would be important is to ask people here what makes them feel healthy and abundant. Because you were talking about stores. Most people I know in Mendocino County feel better if they grow their food, like quietly themselves at home.
Yes.
You're not going to capture that. Or other things about what people value here. What range really wide, but they are unusual. So you would have to ask people what they value. And it's not by political parties, right? It's unique.
So we're going to just.
Let me follow through on that thought.
Mhm.
In a category, for example, like neighborhood and parks. If the way it's looked at in the survey that has already been created doesn't really match our community, it would be nice to be able to have the option for us to define what we consider a neighborhood or a community. To have an option to, if we don't fit into, put a square peg in a round hole kind of thing, that there be an option that we define. Because the community, like in this county, the Native community is extremely connected. there's Round Valley, there's Coval, there's Coyote Valley, there's Sherwood here in Willits. But when they have native celebrations, they're all connected. And so that's not a physical neighborhood, but it is a community. And it's geographically not next to each other, but they could define that our native community is connected and has similar priorities.
Could a project be to create your own healthy places index map of Mendocino with artists? Wouldn't that be fun?
It would.
Yeah.
We're literally just about to finish, then we're going to completely turn it over to you. Just bear with me 1 second, I'm not going to forget you two. So what are the factors that might determine how much a county or region will be apportioned in terms of the almost $3.4 million that we have to disperse to artists and organizations working with artists to support them in their capacity? If we were to divide it up by county alone in the most political way, it would be about 170 and 108,000 per county. However, with the Healthy Places Index in mind and recognizing that some regions have greater density of those dark blue areas, those less healthy communities, we're going to be considering a variety of factors, such as the degree to which a place has, the darker blue track, so to speak, the county population, the geographic size, the county tribal and ethnic makeup, the overall proposal strength, and the degree to which the project proposed is likely to provide fodder for a case study for other communities to borrow from later. How can we create a project that can be borrowed the other side of the country or in another rural community? It worked really well here. How can we replicate it there? And then the degree to which perhaps, again, going over county lines, could artists work with artists in other counties, for example, and make it a more regional thing, where a whole tract of dark blue area is being approached through one project, whether it's in or out of the county, etc., etc. We did put a little note down here, community conditions not captured in the 2020 census. Am I right in thinking that the HPI map is based on data from the HPA? It's the 2020 census. Yes, exactly.
So that was particularly apparent for us when we were in Plymouth County. We looked at the overall scoring for the community of Greenville, the town that burned down. As we were in there, it's like we realized there is nothing that's capturing the fire, the Dixie fire.
Yeah. We found the most extraordinary. We met the most extraordinary people just driving through this town that had been entirely demolished by fire. In the middle of, fractured homes and burnt stumps of former houses and, neighborhoods and trees, like everything was burnt down. It's shocking. You just drive through it, just like you have here. We saw this extraordinary little piece of land between two roads at a crossroads with some camper vans propping up that was becoming a little community. And the little, what do
They
they
call
call
it the spot.
it's called the spot.
They have a sign, the spot.
The spot. And they serve tacos and burgers from but they're literally creating neighborhood out of dust, out of ashes. Absolutely beautiful. So we got this, there was an artist who spoke to us for quite some time, just randomly that we met an artist who's literally creating community and mobilizing and working together. It's just beautiful.
And the thing that was amazing, this area was a residential part of Greenville. And as they are re-looking at the community, and this is again what I was saying, how does Spire give us a chance to think where we want to be 10, 20, 50, how far out, but come up with that scale of what would make more sense. Is it for us to be spread out all over so firefighters are trying to figure out how to protect all these homes? Or is it to have more dense development? Well, might not work in some areas, but what is it? What is our way that we can work with our landscape as we go forward that is more compatible with conditions we might see? And they did this in terms of their town as well and looked at it and changed the entire residential area and have made it now it's going to be the hub of the business community down there.
In England, we would call that the village green. The community has a very specific way that you enter it, where you're welcomed. and a very specific way that you exit. And, you know, goodbye from Little Valley, hello to Little Valley. And in the middle, there is a green. It's a place where people meet and convene and et cetera, et cetera. So there are other questions, and this is the last slide before we let you loose. You know, should we be, you know, what's the size of the grants that we should offer? Should we be offering small residences for 1 month or 1 year to an artist to collaborate with a space that gives them the space, and they have a theme that they agree, aims that they agree? Should it be micro grants versus larger grants? Last night when we were in Lake County, artists said, we really want meaningful size grants of at least, you know, 20,000. And for that, we can collaborate. And for that, we can come up with impacts and plans and things like that. Should we have 1 or 2 big grants of 100,000, you know, that which would require, again, still more collaboration between different sectors and artists supported by those sectors and working together on common themes? And then should we have cross-county regional size grants, you know, maybe a big one for the whole of the upstate? And what would that look like, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's over to you. I want you each to introduce yourself really, really quickly, because we've got quite a few people in the room, because we want to know how many of you are artists, how many of you are representing organizations. But before I just don't want to forget to, you had a question, I know, or you had a thought.
It was a comment, you know, about the tool that we're talking about, with the index for health. And we're keep hearing about representation and about whether it's even representing the values of this. Sorry, okay. I am an elected in Fort Bragg, and I'm listening to the language around neighborhood tree canopy stuff. I'm looking for tools. And what I'm hearing are the tools for justifying access for our region, for our value, being able to use the language they're giving us to represent our own values. So like tree canopy being in neighborhoods, you would be shocked how hard it is to explain to a room of government employees why we need trees when all they're hearing is maintenance issues, you know. So I think there's another way to look at this in terms of, okay, if we're looking at, does it represent us accurately? There's some issues there, but can we use these different policies that they're laying out to then kind of hold space for our actual unique value systems? You know, I think it's a neat tool representing. So, you know, if you're looking at representation, there are a lot of issues. There's a lot more to say in all these, but that was
That's great. I love it. Thank you. And then I think you had a.
Yeah, thank you.
If you can speak.
Sure, of course. This is actually, I think, related to your comment, but I'm realizing that I have not complete clarity on how the Healthy Places Index connects directly to the California Creative Corps funding and programming. At first, I thought maybe what we were kind of getting to was that there was going to be like a thematic requirement that that fundable projects have something to do with either health or placemaking or something. And then I thought maybe it was like the Healthy Places Index was like the financial allocation, formula. But it's not totally clear to me. I think it's an incredible tool, and I think the grant program seems really incredible. I just don't see exactly how they're connected.
And Lucy, will you share that where you're from?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm Lucy Bartholomew. I live in Willits. I'm a public policy advocate, and I've my career has supported various art projects in different ways. I administered the small grant that paid for the mosaics that Alyssa mentioned earlier. Okay,
I know you're at Blue Zones, right?
and I'm at Blue Zones, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
sorry.
Yes.
Not introducing myself.
We're finding, we'll be in, we'll be with Yuba and Sutter as one community on Monday. And the Arts Council there is working beautifully with the Blue Zones project, and I'm seeing correlations there. I don't see creative placemaking as an outcome. I see it as a means. It's part of a process to arrive, that it can attach itself to a challenge that a community might have. It's beautiful. I know we all understand what creative placemaking is. It's the definition is where multiple sectors are working together towards one aim. An example is a project we did in Nevada County called Forest Fire, which saw us working with the UC Berkeley, a research field station that had an experimental forest. Forest Fire as a project was a 4-year project. It's actually a rather good example of the kind of project that could come from the California Creative Corps. And it also happens to be a creative placemaking project, which is bound to place. There's a strong sense of pride of place that permeates through it. You go to the culminating exhibition and you are immersed in a northern central Sierra Nevada forest, which is under threat of catastrophic fire at any given time, just like the Redwood Coast forests. And you are experiencing the history of the 13,000-year history of the forests in relation to how they've been managed through time, starting with indigenous tribes people, the Washoe peoples, then come, European settlers and wipe the forests out. They grow back, but they grow back unhealthily and they're not maintained. And you get small diameter trees with, lots of brush and undergrowth, which lend themselves to catastrophic fire. And but the project also shows what individual human beings within the community where this exhibition, culminating exhibition, it's actually just been de-installed. It was up for 9 months. What individual human beings and community members can actually do. Don't be ascribed, don't be afraid of the smoke you see in the sky when we're doing prescribed burns to protect the forest from catastrophic burns, unintentional burns. And it's a very emotional project for community members. So that's that very strong pride of place is there. But the creative placemaking piece is where multiple sectors come together. So universities, business, we worked with fire departments, CAL FIRE, just, housing associations, just the list goes on. We have those slides in there just as an example, but let's go round. I'm going to start over here with Gary, sorry.
Close.
It was because
My name is Gary Martin. I'm an art historian and I curate shows here at the Willits Center for the Arts.
Thank you, Gary.
I'm Laura Witzek. I'm on the Willits Center for the Arts Board, a board member. I'm the treasurer. I'm also an artist. I've been a recipient of the GAS grants many times, murals and different projects, school children.
Eric Parks, I'm also on the Willits Center for the Arts Board, and I also run one of the local fire stations.
Thank you very, very much for hosting us here again. We just couldn't be more delighted to be here. It's the perfect venue. Thank you.
Love that.
My name is Judy Fish. I am also on the Willits Center for the Arts Board. I am the secretary of the board. I also have many years' experience working with the Native community in this county and also within the education community. I've lived here in Willits since 1976. I guess I was back to the land first. And then I wound up getting absorbed in a lot of different stuff. But I do have extensive grant experience. And I just want to add, I don't want to take up everybody's time, but one of the things that I just really dislike about competitive grant funding is that the people who get the grants are the ones who have money already because they have skilled writers. And so I know that you have to be efficient with how the money is spent. It sounds like how much money you're going to get is gobs of money, but it's not. And I would just hate to see that the people who already have, great grant writers and skilled people get all the money. So I would definitely like to see some way that there can be a technical assistance branch for just like grassroots kind of people who want to do an art project, but just don't have the skill on grant writing. Because that's what tends to happen is that, you know, the organizations that have, they can pay somebody 60 or 75,000 a year to be a grant writer, and they get the funds because they write magnificent proposals. But then the people that really are what this is aimed at don't have that skill. So that's my 2 cents.
So the checks will all be written by Nevada County Arts Council. But Arts Council of Mendocino County and all of the other counties in this 19-county region, that staff is available to help applicants. And the funds are not coming through our organization. They'll go like Nevada County writes all the checks. They can go directly to arts organizations and also directly to individual artists. So there's not like another layer of, you know, bureaucracy
Well,
there.
then my comment on that last question is it should be administered.
Yeah.
Make sure that there's some funds set aside for grassroots kind of projects.
Yeah.
And always have someone, you know, read over your application too, like get a second or a third set of eyes on everything. And I'm happy to
I
do
would
that.
think that our center, if we're gonna help promote this with artists, that we can, you know, try to help people who don't have that skill.
I love the way you think. And this is one of the ways that we're going to be engaging with our county arts councils across the upstate, is that each arts council will provide technical assistance and support during the grant writing process. And we'll also do, Nevada County Arts Council as the administering organization will also provide, like do webinars and have FAQ sheets and be available as well. So we'll be working hand in hand. And we love the fact that the Willits Center for the Arts will also like help to mobilize its community, and perhaps you could have like a grant writing session here or something. So I love it. Thank you.
I already introduced myself. I'm Lucy Bartholomew. I am a public policy advocate for these ones.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Sasha Thomas.
Speak up.
Oh, I feel like I'm talking really loud. My name is Sasha Thomas, and I am the manager for the Willits Center for the Arts. I do a lot of things to make a living. I'm a project manager. I've administered programs. Currently, I manage the Willits Center for the Arts, and I live in Willits. I love our community. It's very beautiful. I hope we'll be able to tell our story. And I think the Community Foundation and the Arts Council do a really good job of making grant applications accessible. So the guidelines and the way you guys do it, I think it's accessible for us here. I think, like Lake County said, like $20,000, that's like or $10,000, because it's very hard for us to access grants at that level currently here. And like we yearn to be able to have that kind of impact, right? So 10, 20, that's awesome. We're also, it seems like multiple organizations work together, right? To get grants of this type. I don't know if we have the legacy capacity of how to even do that. That would be that, like, maybe if you have matching sessions where you're like, oh, Willits Center for the Arts could work with Covelo or Nuenza, you know, like, because we don't really, we have one half-time employee and a working board, right? Like,
I think the issues are gonna be like sort of where people meet, like if you pick an issue and pick a topic that is close to your heart and that you know, can honestly engage with as an artist. And then you find someone who, you know, you can work with that way. And I'm happy to match make.
you do that
absolutely.
already, but.
I'll do it. I'll keep doing it. I love it. I'll do it more. So, yeah.
So we should, because time is moving on, maybe we should actually do some of this. So I'm gonna challenge you to literally give your name and your affiliation if you are, and if you're an artist or not. And let's go around and finish that part. And then we're gonna just divide up into 2 groups or 4 groups or whatever. Thank you very much, Sasha. Thank you.
My name is
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Margie Gomez Good. I'm fairly new here in Willits, but I've lived in Mendocino County for all of my adult life, really on the coast primarily. So I am new here in Willits. I'm a recent board member for Willits Center for the Arts. And I work at the Mendocino County Museum currently. And when I lived in Mendocino, I worked for some years at the Mendocino Arts Center. And for the last couple of years that I lived there, I was doing grant writing. So I
Thank
inspired
you so much.
by grant writing, and pretty much all the grants that I wrote were for, Pomo communities of, by, and for, I really tried to
Very nice.
follow that, so.
Thank you so much. And because time is very short, just name an affiliation, or if you're an artist. Thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Drucker. I'm an artist. I'm a dancer. I was a guest grant recipient many years ago.
Lovely. Thank you. That's great.
I'm Bonnie Tillotson. I'm a retired arts education administrator. I've worked and coordinated multiple counties throughout the state, and I've also written many grants, including federal arts grants. My background is visual and performing arts.
Thank you. That's perfect. Lots of grant writers in the room. I love it.
Melvin Castillo, I'm a farmer, not an artist yet.
What was your name one more time?
Melvin Castillo,
Brilliant. And do we have your email address and name?
you will.
Perfect. Do not let this man leave the room. Next to you.
My name is Karen Maxon. I'm the museum administrator.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Joel Shura, previous theater professor, recent transplant, affiliated with Mendocino College.
Excellent.
Hey, Laura Fogg, I'm an artist. I came up here in 1970 with the Back to the Land movement. I'm a board member of the Arts Council in Mendocino County. I'm a board member of Arts Center Ukiah, representing them today because everybody's busy putting on this fabulous show. And lots of other things.
It's great. Thank you
Retired
so
teacher.
much. That's fabulous. And then back to you at the.
I'm Jessica Marcel Hay. I'm vice mayor of Fort Bragg and an artist.
Thank you for being here.
I'm Leanne Marcel, and I'm the director of the Alleyway Art Project in Fort Bragg.
Fabulous.
And on the board of the Arts Council.
And on the board of the Arts Council.
How could you forget that most important affiliation?
Hi, I know. We haven't seen each other.
We've never met each other in
Oh my
person.
goodness. I love it.
My name is Lisa Pearson. I am the grants coordinator for the city of Fort Bragg.
Oh, fantastic. There's so many resources in this room. You literally can't leave ever.
Ariana Bayer, I work with Janet at Walker.
Fantastic.
And you're an artist.
I'm sorry.
I'm a 20-year arts educator from the DM, and I just moved back here.
From the DM.
And the Fine Arts Museum's the DM on the Legion.
Amazing.
And I'm Janet Self, and I would say first I'm an artist, but I'm also the founder of Blockbooks, which has been a small community arts organization on the coast for the past 17 years. We do all of the art for elementary school children in Fort Bragg. And are exploring a project with the Mendocino Community Clinic to focus on young people through the arts. But we need funds to be able to do.
Yes, we do.
We've
Yes,
been
we
an all
do.
volunteer organization
Yeah.
for 17 years, and so one of our challenges is making a transition.
I'm so glad you mentioned youth, actually, because one of the themes last night when we were in Lake County was that idea of intergenerational learning. How can some of our projects ensure that our young are understanding these issues and being part of the solution? So I'm glad you mentioned that. And
Hi, I'm Stacy Sheldon. I'm a news reporter for KZYX&Z, and I'm doing a story on this so others can be aware of this fabulous opportunity.
oh,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
I'm Jessica Stellato. I've been in Mendocino County for oh gosh, I don't know. But, working as a land use planner, sustainable community development kind of person. I am just a volunteer and a homeschool parent right now, but I continue to work on getting communities more walkable and bikeable. And have written a couple of grants funding that. Will get
Yes, you will.
and on that, check in with your applicants before ditching them off the list. I was crossed off the list for completely solved problems to me, and I did it all volunteer. Oh, so
What's this?
it's
California
California
Arts Council.
Clean California.
Oh, Clean California,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, that's terrible, isn't it? That's a really good bit of feedback from this listening session, like check in with applicants. And that's, you know, under the umbrella of technical assistance essentially, isn't it? We do have 13 individuals within our Zoom call. If anyone would like to introduce themselves in the briefest of ways, partly it's because we're gonna, with the Zoom, we're gonna break out into sessions. And we'd like to do the same here. Do you feel that you have time to do that? Like just 10-minute sessions, like to brainstorm ideas, it would be fun, wouldn't it? Okay, so perhaps, so if we could just like run, what I would do is take everyone off mute and tell everyone to call out their name and their affiliations.
Wow,
All at the same time. Maybe I should just call their names. So
Yes, okay.
Wind.
Hi, I'm Wind. I'm a behavioral health retired director, had an art program in a nonprofit that worked with people across the demographics and was incredibly supportive for such an isolated, at-risk people. So, and the homeless as well.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Wind. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself? Or we have Emily with us too. Would you like to introduce yourself, Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily with the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council. Loving these conversations. Look forward to more.
Great.
And we have Martine with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Martin Betts, or Martine, whichever you like. I'm the Director of Arts and Education at the Mendocino Arts Center.
Thank you.
Hi, Martine.
Kara?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kara Starkweather. I'm the Director of Mendocino Dance Project, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the Arts Council, Mendocino.
Hi, Kara. Thank you. And Nancy? Or Deborah Lennox?
Hi, I'm Deborah Lennox. I'm an artist and I'm the board president at the Mendocino Arts Center. Thank you for including us.
Yes. Thank you, Deborah. And Lillian?
Hi, I'm Lillian Ruby. I'm involved with 3 different nonprofits, the West Business Development Center, the Arts Council of Mendocino County, and the Deep Valley Arts Collective.
Thank you, Lillian. And Joni? And then we have one last person that is just the phone number. If you want to introduce yourself on the profile picture, is only a number.
Mr. Phone number.
Mr. Phone, okay, he can't. It's okay. If also for the Zoom participants, if you haven't sent us your email, name, email, and affiliation, please do so.
In the chat. Yes, we'd love to capture you. We don't want to lose any of you because we're going to be in touch with you, send you the PowerPoint presentation and just keep hounding you to apply for grants. But so we thought we'd split up into some overall sort of groups. What are these? We thought those who are interested in tackling social justice issues could gather in one part of the room. Those of you who are interested in climate mitigation, including fire preparedness and emergency response, could go to another part of the room. Public health, another part of the room. What else did we have? Civic engagement. Yeah, civic engagement.
Yeah, we're probably saying different
We're
things,
saying
but
different
no, it's probably different, but earlier, there was a question up there saying what, like you who brought up the question of what should you be focusing on?
Yeah.
In terms of prioritizing where the money goes.
Yes.
Will we have an opportunity to talk more about that? Because that, like, this is a really particular area and there's some. But we're more in general.
So create issue a question that we can tackle together.
Pardon? Oh, issue a question.
Yes.
How was it phrased up there? It was something to the effect of how should the apportionment be prioritized?
Is it this
The next one.
Go one.
The micro macro.
This one?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my takeaway here was, I mean, looking at like the values that are being assessed in terms of how you're prioritizing. Historically, you see grants going to population, and obviously, that clearly this is a different situation, and, you know, talked about back to landers, and I think there's a lot to be said for counterculture narratives, and this relationship to the earth, and the sustainable kind of underwhelming that you get in this upstate area.
Yeah.
That if there's some way to give priority to these narratives that can really be informative and valuable. I don't, you know, and that the social piece, they don't, a lot of these, like what was being spoken to about, like people not from these different parts of the community, not necessarily engaged in the government. So these metrics that are using the census to kind of assess. Sorry, I'm kind of, my brain and my mouth.
That's
going two
okay.
different directions, but you know, I guess it's hard going into this space and trying to pull grant money for these voices that don't typically engage in the government sphere, right? And so any way that you can help prioritize.
I think my recommendation would be, do you remember how I'm not sure if you were here yet, we did a little bit of a dive into these areas called policy action areas. And those are quite inspiring when you're not looking at the map and you're not looking at the data and you're just considering the why.
Yeah.
The motivating factor in going with the indices that the healthy index map shows. It becomes quite, I might just go back to that just to remind you. I think trying to, as much as possible, align a proposal with one or other area of need that provides a solution is important. And then you can use what you want to use the values of and the incredible integrity of the Back to the Land movement, if that's, and the culture of that within your narrative.
So that
Should
makes
that be
sense as a tool, but I guess my impression was there was a desire for feedback in terms of what values should be held at the forefront, you know, as you guys are looking at that award these funds to the upstate.
I'm trying to,
one way of saying that maybe is that civic engagement is the need we perceive in this, you know, entire county, but specifically Fort Bragg. And then like to use this time together to just quickly sort of like maybe anybody else who is present, who's interested in talking about that, like can go to you and you guys can sort of just get it out onto a piece of paper, just in a messy form. And other people that have a powerful desire to focus on something in this time together, whether or not maybe it, you know, fits neatly. But if it's something you feel powerfully is really relevant to this community, we can say it out loud, we'll cluster around you. I just want to remind everyone, this is a pilot program coming from the state. So let's like be brave. We don't know what, you know, things are going to look like 2 years from now, but like use this time to dream big and kind of like, you know, just, it can be messy in this space, but just get it out, like start the conversation. We don't need to finish anything today, but like, let's just start kind of.
I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer. You have the answer. But I'm trying to help you along with it, but I do think engaging in conversation between yourselves, because I think we're going to learn from you. So Katrina, why don't you go over here and be civic engagement or Climate, yes. Trina needs to be with climate. Anyone interested in climate, go and speak with, Alyssa, would you like to be with civic engagement?
Yeah, I can
Yes,
over there,
that would
and
be
then,
great.
and then, so I think, with since you're here from Blue Zones, like, you know, if you want to have people cluster around you too, around that, so that's, I'll let you, describe what that is in one second, because
Gianna, can you remember what the other areas were so that we can get organized now? Social justice in general.
Public health.
Public health.
You know what we did?
We haven't.
And does anybody else want to be a hub, like, of a conversation around a certain topic?
There should also be like a. Venn diagram where they all-
So Lucy, you're in which area? Because you.
Sure, so I work.
Which category of work, of group session are you going to be in now?
Yeah, so my work is in community well-being, so I think I would. Can that be in a category? I'm not sure. Public health. Public health,
I think
yeah,
public
sure.
health. Okay, so everybody, Lucy, if you wouldn't mind going to sit over there at that end, and then everyone interested in public health, go to Lucy with the pink hat. And then education. Climate is over here.
Education is over here.
Education, yes, thank you. Thank you, Gary. Gary is, follow Gary for education.
Social justice.
Social justice. We could do social justice here.
Where's the social justice group? Over here. Over here?
Yes.
And we're going to now do some breakout rooms for, brilliant.
Eliza.
Yeah. Yeah, I really wouldn't like to. I don't like it. Yeah. I think, right. It might be. And this group is working on what? What is this group?
Has everybody been able to join the breakout rooms? So we only have 7 participants here and we have 5 categories. And you guys can put yourselves off off mute to speak. If you haven't been able to join the breakout room. Maybe we can discuss, who goes where, since we only have 7 people and only 5 rooms.
Ourselves.
Yeah, and she was talking about some wellness and the whole.
So I think for everybody that's on here, let's not do the breakout rooms because we only have 5 participants. So if you guys want to just stick around to what some of these different groups have joined and they'll be sharing ideas with us. And also this meeting is being recorded, so you'll all have access to it.
No, he allowed them.
Later on as well. Thank you, Deborah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yes, and I gave you. Thank you. Very good.
So are we gonna ask you to present? Are we gonna
Yes.
them just to summarize?
Yes, just one person.
I guess. Back to. And I was going with them equally. And so it's like, ouch.
You're gonna lead this part.
Yeah, okay, so I think thank you guys so much for staying and doing this work. So two things. Preparation for writing the guidelines is, did anything come up? I know it did in this group, that requests for Nevada County Arts Council in writing the guidelines. What we came up to, if in evaluating the proposals, there's a ranking and a rubric being applied to make sure that that's communicated clearly in the guidelines, and if it's weighted to like maybe I told them around 5, but just making sure that that's really clear and the ranking is clear. Did anything else come up in the other groups about where you want to make sure that that gets communicated at this phase before the guidelines are written? Requests. Oh, yeah.
I didn't share earlier, but just the idea that, you know, we're here on other people's land, if there could be some reparations kind of concept applied, I'm not sure how to apply that mathematically or numerically with ranking and things like that, but to just somehow capture that I really liked how it said something about, you know, bringing the voice back to people. And I think that should get extra consideration in my perspective.
And there's also questions about, it's a 2-year grant program, it's a pilot program. How is it going to be? Will the deadline be like only one deadline and then it's a 2-year program period, or will there be phased per year? So that was a question that came up. And there was also a thought of maybe the phasing would be good to have a smaller grant that then led into a bigger project.
Like a planning grant that led into a project grant.
Yes.
Yes.
Since we're asking people to be innovative and
yes,
almost like bold and, you know, and fearless with a program that is regional, which is very new. Like, we don't have a lot of grants like this. So you're getting pushed into a new territory. Yeah.
I guess one thing that we talked about a little bit and that you actually brought up during the presentation as well is the fact that this doesn't necessarily have to be a county by county for a local thing. Just our topic in particular, was the climate fire landscape. And the big ones there, fire and water, are a whole Northern California issue. And it would be interesting to see a Northern California project on one of those subjects that you guys are really in the position to help bring together all these different art communities around Northern California and help connect the people who are saying, yeah, I'm passionate about water. I want to do a project about water. Connect them to the person in Nevada County or in Humboldt County and get all of those water people together and see what they can come up with for a whole Northern California project, because our water is not a Mendocino issue. It is all across here. Fire is not a Mendocino issue. So I think, especially since you've had some feedback already that the grant dollar amounts need to be larger. Once you start getting over, 20, 30,000, you're going to have to do that anyway. You're going to have to consolidate some of the projects. So giving the individual groups a course somehow, either manually through you or through your website, to connect with people of the same interest in other areas and let them collaborate on a grant on those subjects would be an interesting, see what comes out of that.
Great. I like that. What we thought we'd do is, just very briefly, let's go from group to group. Could one person from each group first give some
I just
feedback?
respectfully disagree. Like these comments are actually, I don't know, I would love to hear at least the two comments that follow yours, because I also think the when working with a couple of small nonprofits on the coast, one of the things that we're struggling with is that small organizations that are moving into trying to be good employers face a huge hurdle in HR, bookkeeping skill sets that have become rather complex and changeable and can get you in some really big trouble. If we could also, it's boring, but we need to collaborate and have resources at the administrative level, because creatives don't necessarily have those skills. So a network of HR support that is specific to our region and the strength, our different personalities and needs. And when the money comes all the way down to the artist, sometimes small organizations, we need help at that level as well. So I think this sort of concept that you're doing actually has that framework has a big impact on a lot of different areas for small art organizations.
That's great.
I have a question. I have a question to comment. Is this grant that's going to come from regionally going to be disseminated by the county or by the Arts Council of Mendocino or by other entities?
That's a great question. So the checks will come from Nevada County Arts Council as the administering organization. However, you in Mendocino will be evaluating your own projects under the watchful and helpful eye of your own Arts Council. So Arts Council, Mendocino County will be convening a peer review panel, and then we'll be in attendance at each of those review panels, just as an invigilator, if you like, but not actually scoring your application. So it'll be local. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like it will be the Arts Council that will be like the host of the grant process.
Maybe the convener of a panel. So if that makes sense. And I think we're still kind of working out all of this. So feedback at this juncture for them, I think is worthy. But the way that I would approach that is like we had CARES funding that we re-granted from the California Arts Council. And that was intended for communities of color that were the hardest hit by COVID-19. And so the panel was entirely members of that community, and they made the decision and then just presented their decision to the board, and the board approved it. So that's how that happened. It wasn't like our board making the decision. So that this process would be similar to that. It would be, probably people from the agencies in the county that are working around these, so like the Fire Safe Council, the Economic Development and Financing Corporation, maybe the Community Foundation. So it'd be, and then also artists. That's the way I would approach that, and then take the recommendation of those individuals and
I think
that.
the Community Foundation in Mendocino does a really good job of having smaller grants, larger grants. Like maybe if there's kind of individual artists, small aspiring not-for-profit, and then a larger pot for a organization that has.
What do you call a larger pot? Like, what's a large pot for you?
Around here, like over $5,000.
Like 100,000. Like $10,000. No.
We're bribed to write a grant to feed. So that's why she's like, can we get $5,000 to get going and have some HR, right? So that would be inclusive to everyone if you have, and the Community Foundation does that. They have
A
smaller-
mix, a mix. Yeah, yep. That's what we're thinking. We're thinking a mix. We thought, just from what we're hearing so far, plus our own sort of gut feeling on this, is that maybe the maximum amount that you could, there'll be fewer grants of 100,000. There would be some in the middle of about 20,000, a few more of those, and then, you know, a ton of small ones that really empower the individual artist to, you know, in terms of residencies, and partnerships and things. So yeah, that's the kind of direction we're thinking about. We just haven't, we're still only at, you know, county 5 of 19, so that's the direction.
Would it be, would it be possible to tailor both the like size and complexity of the grant application and then also the time scale for the reply on whether you got it or not? Could that be tailored to the scope of the award? Because if you have to take 15, 20, 30 hours to get everything together to apply for a grant, and the grant's only $5,000, then it just makes it really hard for organizations where everyone's a volunteer.
And listen, correct me if you're wrong, I completely am with you there. For God's sake, we just want to make it simple for the ease, for the smaller grants, which are still significant. We make them as easy and accessible as possible. We'll provide them in Spanish and any other language necessary. And
don't make us wait 6 months to get a reply, because sometimes we're like holding community partners at bay that are trying to.
Is this like feedback from the California Arts Council?
All granting organizations. She mentioned the Community Foundation, and I think they do a great job of tailoring like the size of the application for the size of the award.
Yes.
But yes.
Yeah. There'll also be an element, you know, after the end of at the conclusion of the grant activity period, we will ask for some element of final reporting, which we will then be asked for from the state. We will also be developing case studies. So we'll be watching your works in progress and thinking, which projects seem to be lending themselves to case studies that can be used as gold standard projects elsewhere, etc., or are repeatable.
I have to make an argument for larger grants and not the small 5,000 grants. I've been funded a lot not a lot, some in the county and some outside the county in the Bay Area. It's an argument that I'm sure people will go, but you know, 20 people could get $5,000 rather than 10 people getting 50,000. But the $5,000 grants as an artist aren't enough.
Yeah.
They're not enough. They're not enough for small organizations.
Yeah.
What you were saying about the grant writer working, it's the same for the artist, the individual. It's not enough. It never covers the amount of work. I can spend literally 5 days, 8 hours a day working on a grant to get as little as $3,000.
I know. We so hear your pain. We're in the same boat. I know.
And so I've been thinking about this a lot over the years. It's almost better to maybe work in groups. Like I would work with 10 of you here to get a $100,000 grant, so we could each get 20,000 or 15,000. You know, maybe, and that's you know, I don't know, I just think that
Yeah,
we
No, I
don't,
hear
we're a very economically depressed county.
Yeah.
And when we see outside money, it's like, please, you know.
I know.
I mean, I just met a tribal, the Sherwood Valley Rancheria, what's her title? She just secured like a $3.5 million grant for arts education with the tribes, with kids. So I'm like, yeah. Can we all get that?
There
I
is
mean-
there's a fair amount in education coming down from the state at the moment, which is really great. It's, and the organization you need to watch for that is Create California, Create CA. They tell you exactly what's going on with all the ballot measures and all the things that are on in the legislature but yeah, it's good. They're brilliant. And then the other organization that is fabulous in terms of its communication on grant opportunities and ways to advocate for the immediate future is Californians for the Arts. That's the board of directors I serve, but they provide great overview on the different avenues. But I do hear what you're saying. And we've heard other things too, you know, we in Modoc in Alturas, where we were told there are more cows than people. They love to have a $5,000 residency. So we don't want to we want it to be a very accessible thing as well. So it'll be a mix. But it's
Alturas is a completely different community. I think.
absolutely,
Completely different. So
absolutely.
it has to be really, I
Yeah.
guess.
So we're not going to, just to be clear, we're not going to be tailoring the grant application process per county. It'll be for the whole county, and that's why that diversity, that mix of grants and, you know, and expectations is going to be sort of fairly mixed bag. But we'll make sure there's something in there that you can apply to.
Thank you.
Of course, that's really
And
valuable.
Just really quickly, I want to thank you, Eliza, and your team. I know we're not at the end, but I just want to say that this is a lot of work that you're doing. That nobody is forcing them to have this listening session.
I think we're the only
Yeah.
region of 9 regions in California that are actually having a listening session, that are actually going. We thought we can't possibly create a program of integrity with 19 counties within our region unless we go and hear from you. So
Thank you.
it's this very difficult. But it's this incredibly difficult balance of providing enough overview for you to grab onto the tool that we've been told has to be used in the evaluation and hearing from you on the nuances, et cetera, so.
And we are the organization that's administering more counties than any other.
I know. I mean, for me, that says geographic inequity for you right away. Our administration portion of the monies is having to be spread so much thinner, but we want to do it well. But don't worry, everything's going to go back to California Arts Council. We're going to fight for you long term. Any other thoughts from any of your groups? What are we going to do with these?
Can we keep these?
We keep
I
these?
can hand them off to you and I'll take photos.
Sweet, yeah, sweet.
Yeah, take a photo of it if you want to remember an idea on it. But yeah, maybe we can just quickly talk about something, like maybe just 1 or 2 ideas per group.
That would be great. Like, yeah, share some ideas. What did you come up with, Lucy?
Yeah, so, I mean, we talked broadly about like what does public health mean to us, and, you know, it's so far reaching, we basically said everything and then some. But, I'm glad to have the opportunity to point out some of the things that are kind of actionable and that I was really excited about. Anyone is welcome to take a look at what we did, but, we tried to first break down like what is public health and what does it mean to impact public health. And then we kind of dove into like how can art impact public health? We have that down here a little bit, and we kind of you shared some of this already in your presentation. So I won't go too into it, but we got really inspired by the idea of things that actually impacted like the upstream issues. So we talked about like transportation. There's a huge need for transportation, and we came up with the idea. I'm sorry, I forgot who mentioned this first, but like an art bus is like a demonstration project to actually showcase the issue and create a public art piece. Anyway, we talked about like a couple different ideas like that, and then I also just want to point out some of these like cool actionable ideas. We had some concerns about access to the grant. Of course, like I heard you just mention language access and making sure that the grant is available in Spanish. If there's any other like listening sessions or information sessions, just we had some ideas about how like working people could maybe attend those and not miss work, or if it could be childcare, things like that. I don't know if that's something else that's coming down the pike here. And then two ideas that I was just like blown away by, I thought was really, really cool. One was this idea of lending a grant writer. That's kind of how I reworded it. But it's basically, there was a lot of concern in our group that like not all artists are great grant writers. And so we were trying to say like, well, what could be done with that? So there's that idea that maybe a grant writer from an organization or from a city or from the county or someone who is just a passionate grant writer could lend their expertise or read a grant application or something. And then this is paired with this other idea of similarly, there was a concern about how to find people to collaborate with. To go in on an application together. And so Alyssa, I know that you already do this. And so I'm not trying to like suggest this specifically for you, but maybe it's a collective request that we compile the like basically human resources of who like we know or who Alyssa knows who has skills and time to support in reviewing grants or like volunteering their time to help folks write their grants, or people who are the connectors in the community who know other artists who are doing comparable work, who can like suggest that people collaborate or like whatever. So it's kind of a suggestion of a compilation of the human resources we have around us. I think those are the main things that I don't want lost from this. Does anyone else from our group have anything they really want to like make sure is pretty cool? Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. These are going to be gold dust. These are going to go, Alyssa's going to take pictures of them. So that if I lose them, she won't have lost them. I'm only joking. I'm going to literally hang them up in our office and study them in Nevada City. They're so useful. It's a brilliant idea. In fact, we should bring a whiteboard with us to all our meetings, I think, and do this. I think it's great. Well, I think we need to release you. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm really touched by the level of participation today. And I love the fact that you voiced concerns as well. That's just as valid as listening to excitement, because we can't be naive when this much money is on the table and, you know, the eyes of the state are upon us and et cetera, et cetera. So let's do this. Thanks so much.
Yes, and thank you. And if you want to share something from your sheet, I will be here as yours.
Yeah.
If you would like to.
Totally.
Just one I think I was out of the room, so I might have missed this, but I think if there's some idea about how the final project might be evaluated, that's included in the information received.
It will be.
Okay, good.
It won't be immediately. The information on how it will be evaluated will be released at the same time. It'll be part of the grant guidelines. So you'll know upfront before you apply how you will be evaluated.
I'm not talking about the application, I'm talking about the work itself, like once it's completed,
That's
how
right.
do we self-evaluate?
I see, self-evaluation. I love it. Okay, good. I'll take that on board.
Yeah, and we do, I just looked at the time, and we do have to be out of here with the chairs out of the room in 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
I was just making that.